Alright guys, Murph's here, and today I want to go down a thought exercise with you. So for those of you who are new to the channel, thought exercises are when I develop a situation or scenario that is firearms related that I then plan out whatever firearms would be applicable to it. It could be arming a military post-World War I, or selecting weapon systems for the zombie apocalypse. Whatever it may be, I like to pick out different scenarios, set up what the rules are going to look like throw some limitations on myself that then forces me to have to maybe research firearms or options that I wouldn't necessarily embrace otherwise. And then that makes me more knowledgeable in the overall scheme of the firearms community and all that kind of stuff. And it allows me to better advise friends whenever they ask me questions along those same lines. I've been doing this kind of thing since I was a kid, and it's something that I brought to the channel. I do have a couple other videos along the same concept on my channel, and if you don't find them interesting, then go ahead and peruse some of the other videos and see if you like something else. However, for those of you who do want to stick around for this concept, go ahead and grab up a tasty beverage and let's start this discussion. So, this thought exercise is based around conducting a Kentucky elk hunt. Now, for some people, that might be a surprise that Kentucky has a huntable elk population, but they do. They actually started producing this population in 1997 when they reclaimed 4.3 million miles of former mining land. I'm not sure if all of it was mining land, but a large portion of it came from the mines in 16 counties in Kentucky. And apparently the elk population really hit its stride in 2010 and has been growing ever since. Now, they do a little over 300 some odd tags a year, and 90% of those tags go to Kentucky residents, 10% go to out of state. And by far the most numerous tag handed out is cow elk rifle hunting, which is what I plan on having this entire thought exercise based around, if I were to try to go for one of those tags. Now, something that's very important about these tags is that once you get selected for a tag, regardless of whether or not you fill it, you then sit on the bench for 3 years before you are eligible to try to get a new tag. So we're working with a little bit of a time crunch here. If I were to actually get one of these tags, I would totally want to fill it. So I want to make sure that I plan my equipment around having the highest probability of being able to fill that tag so that I'm just the factor that messes all of that up. Now, let's talk about the terrain that we will be hunting in. So this area is characterized by a lot of rolling foothills, fairly open terrain, minus the hills, of course. There is some heavy brush and 3 fairly large bodies of water that are widely geographically separated. Now, there is one other dominating terrain feature in this area, and these are hollow fills, which I can only assume are measures that were taken to fill in the entrances to the mines. And it's kind of a cross between a cut and a fill as far as man-made terrain features go, to where around the area that they filled in, they built up a very large berm in order to combat erosion. So it would really be terrible for an elk to fall into one of those after you shot it. It'd really increase your overall workload. So from what I understand, I've never elk hunted, but I've always wanted to elk hunt. From what I understand, elk hunting is pretty much made up of a lot of glassing and stalking type hunting. Not a whole lot of deer stands or anything like that I'm actually used to. So we're definitely looking to be on the move, mobile, and according to Kentucky Wildlife Service, the average shot is taken between 100 and 300 yards, so we could account for maybe a shade over that, and we would be good. So that's what we're looking to do. Now, overall, I think my major emphasis for this hunt is to give myself the best opportunities to succeed with my equipment. And the only thing we're interested in this case are firearms, optic, cartridge, of course, and then a little bonus round sitting here in this this box that we'll talk about here at the end. Now, since I'm only going to get one shot at this, that's why I would go for the cow elk tag. And if I get a second chance, sometime in the future, then maybe I would start looking for a trophy or something along those lines. But in this case, the major goal is to get meat in the freezer. So, with that being the case, what are Kentucky's regulations on modern firearm hunting for elk. And what it pretty much indicates is that they want to see a 270 or higher caliber rifle. Well, that doesn't narrow things down. There's a ton of 270 and greater caliber rifles on the American market. I would have no problem picking something out like this. So what I decided to do was go down to my local gun shop and take a look at what all was on the wall, and from there start making my decision as what I would carry on this elk hunt. Now, something that's very important that we need to take into account for selections on the wall in the gun shop is that it is late deer season right now when I'm filming this. So a lot of the hunting rifles have already been bought up. A couple of months ago, if I'd made this video, I would have had more options than I could have mentally kept track of. I would have had bring like a pen and paper and written everything down as far as what I could have had available for hunting. That is not the case at this point. Along with everything else, the walls are fairly barren. But I did manage to pick out 4 rifles that would more or less meet my needs. So let's go through these options today and see what it is that I'm going to pick out. So the options are a Marlin 1895 CB chambered in 4570, a Remington Model 783 and 270 Winchester, a Cooper Firearms Model 52 Timberline in 270 Winchester, and a Seiko 75 and 300 Winchester short mag. All right, so let's start out with the Marlin 1895 CB. Now, the 4570 is most definitely within our performance parameter for elk hunting. That is a fantastically powerful cartridge, especially with modern loads and being paired with a rifle that can actually handle those modern loads. It would perform wonderfully. However, the 4570 cartridge has a bit of a rainbow-like trajectory to it. And as much as modern Marlin 1895s are drilled and tapped for optics, it's still not exactly what I want to default to for a hunting rifle on elk. What I normally think of whenever I think of large bore lever action rifles are more heavy brush type hunting, where my shots are probably going to be around 100 yards. That would be a much more favorable performance area for the 4570. Now, in this hunt, I could work to within 100 yards of an elk and have that much easier of a time taking a shot. But I want to be able to take advantage of that 300-yard potential, and I don't think the 4570 cartridge is the best choice out of everything that's available. So let's go ahead and sideline that guy. Now, the Remington Model 783 and 270 Winchester. Let's talk about that one. The 783 is a continuation of the Remington Model 770. If I am completely honest, I am not a fan of either rifle. Now, for price concerns, the 783 is definitely a difficult price to beat. And both rifles, the 770 and the 783, have accounted for plenty of deer being taken every year, and they are roughly 1 MOA rifles to begin with, so they're accurate. They're perfectly capable hunters. I'm not trying to take that away from them. My issue with the 783 comes a lot to fit and finish, to where I'm willing to pay a little bit more money to have a better constructed rifle. That's not to say that it doesn't perform well for its price point, as much as it's to say that I would prefer better fit and finish at a little bit higher price point. Now, I've seen plenty of successful hunts with those budget end of rifles, but my biggest issue specifically with the 783 comes down to it seems to have magazine issues based off of all the information I've been able to gather. And I am really unwilling to pay for a product that does not work well. And that's a fishy ground to get into, because you could bring up a lot of different systems that have a tendency to malfunction, but when it's a so often repeated data point for the 783, that makes me less interested in it, if I'm completely honest. So in this case, we're going to sideline the Remington Model 783. So now let's talk about the Cooper Firearms Model 52 Timberline. We've gone from one end of the cost spectrum to the other. This rifle runs in excess of $2,600. However, they are handmade, hand-fitted works of art, I guess you could basically say. They're not exactly the prettiest of firearms. There's not fancy scroll work and all that kind of stuff, but they are precision set to be very accurate hunting rifles. And they're actually kind of light, which weight is not necessarily my objective during this process as much as it's still a consideration, because though I'm not scaling mountains, I am going up and down hills all day potentially on this hunt in this fictitious world. But I would not necessarily turn down a lighter weight overall firearm as much as I would use it as maybe something that would help me turn a decision one way or the other. Now, specific to the Cooper Firearms Model 52, let's talk about the 270 Winchester cartridge. Now, the vast majority of firearms authors in the world would tell you that the 270 Winchester is perfectly capable for anything in North America, with a little caveat, which is bullet selection notwithstanding. So, what is generally recommended for larger game in North America with the 270 Winchester cartridge is the 150 grain load. Now, elk range well over 600 pounds, so I definitely think they constitute for big game hunting in North America. Now, I own a 270, and I absolutely love the 270 Winchester cartridge. It is one of my favorite hunting cartridges. I love it for white-tailed deer. However, I have noticed something about 150 grain loads that I do not care for in this respect, and that is that they have a tendency to drop quite rapidly. And I noticed this because my hunting rifle was originally zeroed for 150 grain loads, and I did not care for the amount of holdover I had to account for shooting over what I consider to be relatively short distances of between 250 and 300 yards. When I switched over to a 130 grain cartridge, I got more of that flat shooting trajectory that the 270 Winchester is known for. I consider the 130 grain load a superior cartridge in the 270 Winchester. However, I do not necessarily think that it's the best choice for elk. Now, keep in mind, guys, while we're doing this overall discussion, we're talking about factory ammunition because I can easily source that information to be able to drive decisions, be it velocities or energy and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if we talk about hand loads, it's getting into a little bit of a gray area that since I don't hand load, I don't maybe have the best understanding of, and I don't feel strong enough to be able to discuss aspects of kind of fringe, I don't want to call it fringe science, but at least fringe data, stuff that I can't necessarily correlate or corroborate, and I have a greater sense of security with factory ammunition in that regard in this case. It's something that I can better qualify or quantify. Now, I have found multiple accounts of elk hunters using 140 grain 270 Winchester and having excellent performance on elk. However, since I'm already trying to hunt at perhaps what is a little bit greater distance than what some people would necessarily want to take shots with a lighter load in a 270 Winchester, then perhaps 270 Winchester isn't necessarily the do-all that I need it to be in this case. I'm not sidelining the Model 52, but I am saying let's go ahead and take a look at the Seiko 75. Now, Seikos, for some reason, do not have a very strong following in the States, but they are very popular in Europe, and they are very fine rifles. Excellent fit and finish, well constructed, not inexpensive, but also not necessarily breaking the bank. But in this rifle, what we really need to talk about is the 300 Winchester Short Mag. Now, the 300 Winchester Short Mag is to the 300 Winchester Magnum what the 308 is to the 30-06. Now, what does that mean for those of us who aren't super fluent in cartridges? The 300 Winchester Short Mag very closely replicates the 300 Winchester Magnum in a shorter overall action, which means a lighter overall rifle. And it comes very close in velocity, energy, penetration, all those kinds of things. They are exceedingly close to each other. Now, the great thing about 300 Winchester Short Mag is that it's a 30 caliber cartridge, and it seems to generally come loaded with heavier weighted 30 caliber bullets. I think the lightest I saw was a 165. I'm sure you could do 150s and all kinds of other things if you really want to get that velocity high. But the great thing about the 300 Winchester Short Mag is that it has a great relationship between velocity, mass, and then that's impact on calculating foot-pounds of energy and expectation for a successful overall hunt. This is starting to look really advantageous. Now, of course, A 300 Winchester short mag in a lightweight rifle is probably going to be a little brutal in recoil. However, we're not talking about going through a 50 round shot string. We're talking about 1, maybe 2 shots during a hunt. I think I can withstand the recoil for that period of time. Okay, so that versus the 270 Winchester. Well, the 270 Winchester has a leg up over the 300 Winchester short mag in that the ammunition is cheaper and far more available. 300 Winchester short mag for the load that, as I was looking around, I was seeing roughly about $3 a box, or excuse me, $3 a round for a 20 round box. So we're talking about $60 a box. That's expensive. I've not paid prices like that since I was in Europe. However, this is a very niche cartridge for a very niche purpose, for, in this case, a very niche rifle for a type of hunting that I don't often get to indulge in. I could be convinced to spend the money on the cartridge, especially since I would have a very favorable relationship between energy on target and flat overall shooting trajectory. I think the Seiko 75 with the 300 Winchester short mag wins in this case. Now, talking about drop and all that kind of stuff, I have an app on my phone that is the iStrelok app. Now, I'm not throwing this out there because I'm in some way endorsed by these people. It's like a $5 app to download, and there's a ton of different apps on your phones that can do this exact same kind of thing. But what this app does is that it combines your scope offering with the reticle that you have, and then what you have the rifle zeroed at, what load you have it zeroed for, and then what your point of impacts are going to look like for different ranges. You can just sit all across there, and I'll roll in photos for what it is that I have picked out for this rifle. Now, the optic that I picked out is a 4.5 to 27 power. That's probably way more power than I actually need for this hunt for just 300 yards. I'm not trying to pick flies off of the elk. I'm trying to put the elk down. But there's no question as to whether or not I have enough magnification, so I've got that going for me. And I can show you here where my drops are going to be for a 200 grain 300 Winchester short mag moving at 2,810 feet per second. I believe it was a Hornady trophy bonded or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact load, but this app can show you all of that information. And it's actually really great. I love picking out different rifles and scope combinations and then trying to see what my holders would look like for different distances. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty cool. All right, guys, so we have a rifle and an optic. So what's in my my box over here? Well, no hunter is properly outfitted without a hunting knife. And this is my big old box of random knives that I've collected over the years. I'm kind of a lightly avid knife collector. I really enjoy knives. I don't know as much about them as I wish I did, but I have a very large collection. I've been collecting since I was a kid. I have a wide variety of knives in here, from gifts from friends and family to high quality things I purchased, low quality things that I purchased, things that I collected when I was a kid. I've got bayonets, tomahawks, machetes, all kinds of stuff in here. So what we're going to find out today is I'm going to pick a knife out of this box, and we're going to see how screwed I am on an elk hunt. Because there's everything. There's fixed blades, folding knives, lock blades, auto openers, the whole shebang. We're going to see how successful I'm going to be at dressing out and potentially having to quarter this elk that I hopefully harvest on this fictitious hunt. All right, let's see. I'm not going to take a look. I'm just going to reach in here, and I'm going to grab a Boker. I think I know which one this is. Yep. All right, guys. I am incredibly screwed on this hunt because this is a Boker ceramic knife that I got for work. Well, I got from work a couple of years ago for different things that we have to do sometimes. And this is not going to end well at all. Now, this knife will probably break in no time flat trying to fully work around a deer. At the very least, I'm going to chip out an edge once I run this thing up against bone for the first time. But you know what? it happens. This is what happens when we pick things at random. What I was hoping to draw, which seems to have fallen apart, what I was hoping to draw was my German hunting belt, or the hunting belt that I wore when I hunted in Germany. Now this belt setup has two knives on it. A Mauser bayonet, which is favored, this and many other styles of bayonet are favored in Germany, specifically for if you have to either put an animal out of its misery because of a poor shot, or maybe a shot that has not yet done all of its work, or as a defense against a charging pig. And they want something specifically long enough in order to be able to actually penetrate all the way into the heart-lung region. I can say from experience that this knife, this bayonet, still does its work. It's actually not that unusual to see German hunters carry surplus rifles with fixed bayonets to work as the spear that they were more or less meant to be in order to be able to take on pigs during a drive hunt. I actually specifically saw a guy with a Mosin-Nagant M44 carbine with the spike bayonet, and that was his purpose, was to have it for defense against a charging pig. And then I also have my actual hunting knife, which is a Mora with some wonderful light colored wood grips with that stainless steel tang coming down off of it. Now these are fantastic knives. These use a Sandvik style steel, so the belly of the blade is a little bit softer, which may not have the greatest edge retention, though it is a laminated steel, so it actually has fairly decent retention based on some aspect of science that I don't fully understand, admittedly. But it's a little softer, which gives it a little bit of give, and then the spines are harder so that you don't have too much give and you potentially go breaking a knife or something like that. I lusted after this knife the entire time I was taking my hunting course in Germany, and bought it as soon as I graduated. That's what I was hoping to draw, but you know what? I guess I'll just have to fictitiously figure it out with a ceramic boker. So, all right, guys, that pretty much covers what I have for this particular hunt. I hope you found this conversation interesting overall. I would love for you guys who have gone on elk hunts before to go ahead and throw in what your rifle and cartridge combination were. I would love to hear about it. I'd love to expand my knowledge on this subject. I can't wait to someday finally be able to partake in an elk hunt or moose or any of the larger North American game. But up until then, I guess I'll just have to wonder. So, have a good day.